The blindfold came off and Nadia Osei counted 6 guns before she counted the man holding the room. He was standing at the far end of a penthouse that smelled like power and bad decisions, arms crossed, dark eyes moving over her the way someone looks at a piece of equipment they're not sure is worth the price. When Kang Joon-ho finally spoke, his voice was flat and unimpressed, like she was a minor inconvenience that had been delivered to the wrong address. "You're the best they could find," he said. Disappointing. Nadia looked at him. Looked at the router blinking in the corner. Looked back at him. "Keep talking," she said quietly, "and I will lock every device in this building before you finish that sentence." The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the room, and something cracked open behind his eyes that had never cracked before, something he would spend the next 6 months trying to close. Welcome to Afrohan Tales Besties. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing stories like this. It started on a Tuesday, which Nadia would later decide was the universe's sense of humor. She was in a corner booth at a 24-hour cafe in Itaewon, 3 espresso cups deep. Her laptop open to a security framework she had been rebuilding for a Seoul fintech firm that had managed to make their own encryption architecture look like a cardboard box. It was past midnight. She had been in Seoul for 6 weeks. She had not once, in those 6 weeks, felt anything close to unsafe. She noticed the men when they were 4 steps away, which was 4 steps too late, and also, she would admit privately, 4 steps earlier than most people would have noticed at all. They were professional. Black suits, no visible weapons, the particular blankness of men who had done this before. A cloth over her eyes, a firm grip on each arm, a vehicle that moved through Seoul's streets with practiced confidence. She counted turns, memorized intervals, noted the pressure change in her ears, elevator, high floor, 40-something stories, carpet beneath her feet, climate-controlled air with the particular quality of spaces that had never once worried about utility bills. The blindfold came off. She blinked once. Took in the room, floor-to-ceiling windows bleeding Seoul's skyline into the dark, furniture that belonged in an architecture museum, 6 men at deliberate positions, and 1 man at the center of it all who looked like he had been built specifically to make other people feel small. Kang Joon-ho was 34 years old. He was tall and sharp-jawed and dangerously still, the kind of stillness that wasn't peace, but the opposite of it, a compressed, coiled thing that promised consequence. He had dark eyes and a face that would have been beautiful if it weren't so deliberately cold, and he was looking at Nadia the way one looks at a package that has arrived damaged. He let the silence stretch. She had been told later, by people who had sat in this room before her, that most people broke in the first 10 seconds. Nadia looked past him at the router blinking in the corner and began calculating. "You're the best they could find," he said finally. Flat. No question mark. Disappointing. Nadia looked at him. "Keep talking," she said, "and I will lock every device in this building before you finish that sentence." Something moved in his eyes. He uncrossed his arms slowly. "Do you know who I am?" he said. "I know what you are," she said. "You're a man with a problem you can't solve yourself, which is why I'm here. So either tell me what the problem is, or have your men drive me back to my cafe, because I had work to finish." The silence in the room was extraordinary. One of the men behind her shifted his weight. Joon-ho looked at her for a moment longer, something behind his composure doing something she couldn't name, and then he crossed to the table and dropped a locked hard drive in front of her like he was dropping a piece of garbage. "This drive contains fabricated evidence planted by a rival organization," he said. "It is designed to frame me for a murder I did not commit and dismantle everything this organization has built over 3 generations. My technical team failed. You have 48 hours. And if I don't," she said. He looked at her. "Then you'll wish you had." Nadia pulled her laptop bag onto the table and unzipped it. "I'll need full network access, a proper chair, and something to eat that isn't whatever your men had for dinner." She glanced up. "And your Wi-Fi password." Joon-ho stared at her. "Now, please," she said, and opened her laptop. The first night, he tested her. It started subtly. One of his men, stocky, smirking, clearly selected for the assignment, leaned over her workspace and said the password was complex. Maybe she should let one of their IT people set her up. Nadia didn't look up. She had already pulled the password from the router's default admin panel in the first 4 minutes and been inside the network since before anyone brought her the chair. When Joon-ho came to check her progress 2 hours in, she handed him a printed page. She had found his printer, too, listing 17 active vulnerabilities in his building's security infrastructure, ranked by severity, with recommended remediation for each. He looked at the page, then at her. "This wasn't what I asked for," he said. "No," she agreed. "It's what you needed. There's a difference." She went back to her screen. "You're welcome." His jaw tightened. He set the page down and walked away. Park Dae-jung, Joon-ho's lieutenant, compact and watchful, brought her food an hour later. He set it beside her with a pleasantness that felt practiced, and she thanked him without looking up, and he lingered a moment too long before leaving, and she filed that away the way she filed everything. At the 4-hour mark, she hit the first serious encryption layer and worked through it in 22 minutes. She was aware of Joon-ho on the periphery circling. He stopped behind her once, looked at her screen, and said, "My last developer spent a week on that layer." "I know," she said. His methodology is still in the system's access logs. He was doing it wrong. She felt his irritation like a change in air pressure. "You're awfully confident," he said, "for someone in your position." She turned her chair to face him. Fully. Unhurried. "My position," she said, "is that I'm the only person in this room who can solve your problem. Your position is that you need me to. So I would strongly suggest you stop trying to intimidate the one person you actually need and let me work." Joon-ho looked at her for a long moment. His face was very controlled. But something behind his eyes was doing something he clearly didn't have a name for either. He walked away without responding. She turned back to her screen and exhaled very slowly and told herself that the slight unsteadiness in her hands was from the espresso. By the second day, she had cracked 3 of the drive's 5 encryption layers. She had also, quietly, begun building a mirror, a private cloud partition behind 17 layers of her own design, where she was storing everything she recovered. Insurance. She said nothing about it to anyone. Joon-ho came in at noon and stood over her workspace and said, "My previous developer recovered this much in 4 days. You're behind." Nadia stopped typing. She turned her chair around slowly. She looked at him with the particular expression of a woman who has been underestimated enough times that the experience no longer surprises her but has not, for a single moment, become acceptable. "Say that again," she said quietly. He held her gaze. "You heard me." "I heard you compare me to someone who failed," she said. "I'm going to need you to think about what you just said, and then never say anything like it again. I am not your previous developer. I am not a replacement for your previous developer. I am Nadia Osei, and there is no one on this peninsula or the next one who does what I do at the level I do it. So the next time you want to motivate me by insulting me, save yourself the energy. It won't work, and it will make me less inclined to help you." She turned back to her screen. "Close the door on your way out." The room was absolutely silent. Joon-ho stood behind her for 3 full seconds. Then he walked out. She heard the door close, not slammed, which told her something. She wasn't sure what, and she sat in the quiet and breathed steadily and cracked the 4th layer 40 minutes later. That evening, he sent food again. Better food this time. She did not comment on the upgrade. On the morning of the 3rd day, she found the 5th layer and what was behind it. The evidence was fabricated. She had suspected this, but now she could prove it. 3 timestamp errors buried deep in the metadata. A digital fingerprint that traced back not to Joon-ho or the Kang organization, but to a server cluster registered under a shell company linked to the Han syndicate. She built the counter-evidence file methodically, documented every thread, assembled it into something that would hold up in any court in any country. And before she handed any of it over, she finished her mirror. Everything, every file, every trace, every piece of the fabrication she had dismantled, sitting behind 17 layers of encryption on a partition that only she could access. She called Joon-ho into the room. She presented her findings across the conference table with his full senior team present. She walked them through the fabrication, the errors, the origin trace. She was precise and thorough and completely unemotional about it, and when she was finished, she closed her laptop and waited. The room was silent. One of the senior lieutenants said, slowly, "She traced it back to the Han family in 3 days." "In 2.5, Nadia said. "I spent the last 6 hours building the counterfiling." Joon-ho was standing at the head of the table. He was looking at her with an expression she hadn't seen from him yet, not cold, not dismissive. Something more complicated and far less comfortable for him. "What do you want?" he said. "For the counterfiling." "Name it." "I'll name it when I'm ready to leave," she said. "I'm not finished." He raised an eyebrow. "The drive is cracked. You're done." "The Han organization planted this evidence," she said, "which means they have infrastructure in place to do it again. Or worse. If you want a permanent solution rather than a temporary one, I need 3 more days." She paused. "But that's your call. You can take the counterfiling now and handle the rest yourself. I've seen how that's been going for you." Park Dae-jung made a small sound that might have been a laugh. He converted it into a cough. Joon-ho looked at Nadia for a long moment. 3 days, he said. "If you're glued to your screen right now, hit that like button and tell me in the comments, is Nadia the most iconic female lead you've ever seen? Keep watching because it only gets better from here." 3 days became 5 because the Han organization, as if sensing the ground shifting beneath them, launched a coordinated digital assault on the Kang network on the 4th night. It was 2 in the morning. Nadia was still at her workstation. She had been sleeping 4 hours a night in the guest room they had eventually, without discussion, simply assigned her when every screen in the building flickered. She sat up straight. Her fingers were moving before she was fully conscious of the decision. The attack was sophisticated, layered, the kind of architecture that took weeks to plan and considerable money to execute. They were inside the Kang network in under 60 seconds. Nadia shut them out in 3 minutes and 41 seconds. She traced the breach pathway, sealed every entry point, documented the intrusion architecture, and had a full report on the table before Joon-ho's security team had finished their emergency protocols. She walked back to her workstation, sat down, and picked up her cold tea. Joon-ho came in 40 seconds later. He looked at the screens, at the reports she had left, and then at her. "They're inside your network because someone opened a door from inside," she said, without turning. "I've known for 2 days. I've been gathering the evidence." She slid a folder across the desk. "Park Dae-jung has been diverting operating funds for 8 months and feeding intelligence to the Han family for at least 6. He also passed my full identity, my name, my family's address in Accra, my mother's phone number, to the Han boss 3 days ago." She felt the air in the room change. Profoundly. "My family is already safe," she continued. "I moved them and locked their digital footprints before I finished this folder. They're unfindable." Joon-ho picked up the folder. He opened it. He read it standing up, which told her something about the quality of his composure, because most people would have needed to sit down. When he looked up, something in his face was different. Not the cold. Not the dismissiveness. Something rawer underneath, something that looked like a man confronting a very specific kind of betrayal. "You moved your family before you told me," he said. "I handle mine," she said. "Same as you." He stood there looking at her for a moment that stretched long enough to be something other than professional. "Dae-jung," he said finally. "Is in the building," she said. "3rd floor. He doesn't know I have this yet." Joon-ho set the folder down. He straightened his jacket. He walked out. She listened to the sound of the building doing what buildings do when a man like Kang Joon-ho has somewhere to be, and she went back to her screen, and she told herself the weight in her chest was not concern for him. She was almost convincing. The exposure happened in the main conference room the following morning. Every senior lieutenant, every member of the Kang Inner Circle, 31 people who had structured their lives around this name and this code and the loyalty that was supposed to mean something. Nadia stood at the screen at Joon-ho's request, which he had delivered the night before in the hallway outside the conference room, quietly, without his usual commanding tone. "Will you present it?" he had said. "Not in order. Not even close to an order." She had looked at him. "Yes," she said. She put everything up. Every transaction, every communication, every timestamp. Dae-jung's full architecture of betrayal, laid out with the precision of someone who understood that the truth, presented cleanly, does not need help. She did not editorialize. She did not perform. She simply showed them what she had found and let it speak. Park Dae-young stood in the center of the room. He looked at the screen. He said nothing. There was nothing to say. Joon-ho addressed the room afterward in a quiet, even voice that carried more authority than shouting ever could. He outlined what had been done, what it had cost, and what it meant. When he finished, he looked at Dae-jung one last time, not with rage, but with something colder and more final than rage, and had him removed. The inner circle stood in the silence. Then Joon-ho turned to Nadia and said, in front of all of them, "Thank you." She held his gaze, nodded once, and began closing her files. She was ready to leave by the following afternoon. She packed her equipment methodically in the guest room, and Joon-ho appeared in the doorway, and this time when he looked at her there was none of the original dismissiveness. He leaned against the frame and watched her with that particular focused attention she had been aware of for days now and had been declining to examine. "Name your price," he said. Price for what she said. "How much to make you stay," he said. She named a number. It was large. Aggressively, deliberately large, the kind of number that factored in the kidnapping, the threats, the sleep deprivation, and the experience of being called disappointing by a man she had subsequently saved from organizational collapse. His CFO, somewhere in the hallway, made a sound like he'd been struck. Joon-ho's expression did not change. "Done," he said. Nadia stopped packing. She turned to look at him. He met her gaze without blinking. "You didn't negotiate," she said. "I don't negotiate for things I'm not willing to lose." She looked at him for a long moment. The room was very quiet. "No," she said. He blinked. For the first time in everything she had observed of him, Kang Joon-ho looked genuinely caught off guard. "No," he repeated. "I'm not taking your money," she said. "Not yet. Not until you say something." "I offered you." "I know what you offered me," she said. "You called me disappointing the second I walked into this building. You compared me to your failed developer to my face. You spent 3 days trying to intimidate a woman you needed to save you." She zipped her bag closed. "The money is fine. But I don't work for people who don't respect me. So before I take anything from you, I need you to say it." Joon-ho stood in the doorway. His jaw was working. She could see, clearly, the war happening inside him, the part of him that had never apologized to anyone in his life battling something newer and considerably less comfortable. He started. Stopped. "My assessment of you is wrong. That's not what I asked for." A long pause. "I was disrespectful," he said. The words came out like they cost him something significant. "What I said when you arrived was wrong. He stopped again. "You are not what I expected. In any way. I'm sorry for sending my men to pick you up like that." Nadia looked at him. "Thank you," she said. She picked up her bag. "Now I'll take the money. And we're done." She walked past him into the hallway. He let her go. But as she reached the elevator, she heard him say her name quietly, just once, the way someone says a word they've been keeping in their mouth. She pressed the button and did not turn around. She was back in her hotel room by evening. Back to her real life, existing contracts, client calls, the fintech firm she had technically abandoned for nearly 2 weeks. She rebuilt her routine with the efficiency she applied to everything and told herself the faint restlessness she felt was just the come down from intensity. She had been in a high-stakes environment for 10 days. It was normal to feel the absence. She told herself that for about 3 days. On the 4th day, Min Seo Kong called her. Nadia stared at her phone. She had not given Min Seo her number. She answered out of pure curiosity. "How did you get this number?" she said. "I'm very resourceful," Min Seo said, without apology. "Are you available for a brief question?" "About what?" "Someone has been in my accounts for 3 weeks. I noticed something strange and I remembered what you said." A pause. "I don't know who else to call." Nadia sat down on her hotel bed. She walked Min Seo through it over the phone in 20 minutes, identified the intrusion, guided her through the block, changed her security configuration. Min Seo was sharp and learned fast, asking the right questions, and by the end of the call something in her voice had shifted from guarded to something approaching genuine. "Thank you," Min Seo said. "Don't give that number to anyone," Nadia said. I already gave it to my brother. Minacio. Goodbye, Minacio said pleasantly and hung up. Nadia held the phone. She looked at the ceiling for a while. Joon-ho did not call. She told herself this was fine. She told herself this several more times over the following week, and the more she told herself, the less convincing it became. 3 weeks after she left, the Kang Empire began to crack. It started with the Han organization's second assault, smarter this time, more layered, targeting the Kang network's newly exposed weaknesses with surgical precision. Joon-ho brought in a replacement developer. Young, expensive, highly recommended. He lasted 4 days before the attack got through his defenses and took down 2 of the Kang organization's primary financial servers. Joon-ho brought in a second developer. This one came with a team. They spent a week reinforcing the wrong entry points, while the Han organization quietly migrated the original intrusion to a secondary pathway Nadia had flagged in her vulnerability report, the one nobody had acted on. The second team's defense collapsed in 6 days. The Han organization was now inside the Kang financial network with enough access to freeze accounts, mirror transaction data, and threaten everything the legitimate transition had been building toward. 2 of the organization's most important legal partners quietly began asking difficult questions. A government regulatory body opened a preliminary inquiry. 3 senior lieutenants requested emergency meetings. Joon-ho sat in his conference room alone one evening and looked at the wall, and he thought about a woman who had found 17 vulnerabilities in his building in the first 90 minutes and told him about them without being asked. Minacio came in and sat across from him and said, "You know who you need." "Don't," he said. "The second team broke 3 of the protocols she built," Minacio said. "The ones that were still standing were the only reason we're not completely dark right now. She built things that survived contact with professionals hired specifically to replace them." She paused. "Call her. She doesn't work for people who don't respect her," he said. And something about how he said it, precise, like a quote he had memorized, made Minacio look at him differently. "Then give her a reason to come back," she said. "Not money. You already know that won't work." He said nothing. Minacio stood up. "The Han family releases their next wave in 72 hours. We intercepted the communication this morning." She walked to the door. "I'm going to call her myself if you don't." He called. She let it ring 4 times. Not because she didn't see his name. Because she needed 4 rings to decide what version of herself was going to answer. "Joon-ho," she said. Silence for a moment. Then, "I need your help." "I know," she said. "I've been watching the breach reports. Your second team broke 3 of my original containment frameworks." A pause. "You've been watching." "I built that network," she said. "I notice when people break my work." "Then you know how bad it is." "Yes." Another pause. Longer this time. "I've had 2 teams fail," he said. "Both recommended. Both expensive. Neither of them," he stopped. She heard him exhale. "Neither of them was you." She sat very still. "I'm not saying this to flatter you," he said. "I'm saying it because it's true and because I don't have time to say anything other than true things. The Han organization releases their next assault in 72 hours. If they get full access to the financial network, 3 years of legitimate transition work is gone. My father built that transition. It was the last thing he asked me to protect." His voice dropped. "I am asking you. Please." Nadia looked out her hotel window at Seoul's skyline. "I have conditions," she said. "Name them." "I'll name them in person. Tomorrow morning. My terms, my timeline, my methods. No interference, no commentary on my pace, no comparisons to previous developers." "Agreed." "And Joon-ho." "Yes. If you speak to me the way you spoke to me the first night," she said, "I will walk out and I will not come back. We're clear." A pause. Then, quietly, "We're clear." She hung up. She sat in the quiet of her room and breathed steadily and told herself, one more time, with diminishing effectiveness, that this was a professional decision. She arrived the next morning at 8. Joon-ho was already in the office. He was wearing a dark suit and his face was composed, and he looked like a man who had not slept particularly well, which was the most human she had ever seen him. He stood when she came in. She noticed this, filed it away, and he did not speak first, which was also new. Sit down, she said. Both of us. I want to show you what your team's broke and what's still standing, and then I'm going to tell you exactly what I need to fix it. They sat across from each other, and she opened her laptop and walked him through it. He listened without interrupting. He asked 2 questions, both precise and intelligent, and when she answered, he absorbed the information without ego and moved on. She noticed that too. When she finished, he said, "What do you need?" "Full access. No shadow oversight from your IT team. 48 hours of uninterrupted work, which means I need the second team off the network entirely. Their access credentials revoked before I touch anything. Done. And I want Minacio working with me." He blinked. Minacio isn't technical. She's smarter than half your technical team, and she asks better questions, Nadia said. She's technical enough to learn what I need her to learn. She closed her laptop. Do we have a deal? He looked at her across the table. In the morning light, with the composure slightly worn and the fatigue visible under his eyes, he looked less like a symbol and more like a person. It did something unhelpful to her chest. We have a deal, he said. And Nadia. She raised an eyebrow. Thank you, he said. For coming back. You didn't have to. No, she said. I didn't. She stood and picked up her laptop. Don't make me regret it. She shut down the Han organization's 3rd assault in 39 hours. It was the finest defensive work she had ever done, not because it was the most technically complex, though it was that, but because she was working against an active, adaptive, real-time threat with broken infrastructure underneath her and a 72-hour clock running down. She rebuilt the containment architecture from the base layer up, sealed every entry point the second team had compromised, and built 3 redundant backup frameworks around the most critical financial nodes. Minacio sat beside her for most of it, learning in real time, asking questions that got sharper as the hours passed. By hour 30, she was catching things without being told. When the Han organization launched at hour 41, 20 minutes ahead of the intercepted schedule, which told Nadia they had a second informant inside, it hit a network that was no longer recognizable as the one they had mapped. Every pathway they had prepared for was either sealed or rerouted into a documentation trap. Within 11 minutes, Nadia had captured their entire attack architecture, traced it to its origin servers, and passed the coordinates to Joon-ho's team. By hour 48, the Han organization's digital infrastructure was dismantled. Their financial accounts flagged and frozen. Their communication network dark. Nadia sat back in her chair and drank cold coffee and felt the specific exhaustion of having done something very hard very well. Joon-ho came in quietly and set fresh coffee beside her. Said nothing. She looked at the coffee. Then at him. You remembered how I take it, she said. I pay attention, he said simply and sat down across from her. They stayed like that for a while, the quiet of the aftermath, the city bright and indifferent outside the windows, and it was the most comfortable silence she had experienced in years, which was its own kind of problem. Besties, are you feeling the shift between them? Comment below. When did you feel Joon-ho start to change? And subscribe right now because the next part is where everything breaks open. Chairman Kang asked to see her the following week. She had heard about him, Joon-ho's father, the architect of the original empire, frail now and diminished in body, but not in anything else. She was brought to his private room, and he was sitting up in his bed with the particular alertness of someone who has learned to use their remaining energy precisely. He looked at her for a long moment. The way someone looks when they're not assessing a person but simply seeing them. You came back, he said. I came back to finish the work, she said. The work was finished the first time, he said. You came back for something else. He said it without malice, just the calm directness of a man with no time left for anything indirect. My son is, he paused. He is what he is. He was born without softness, and he was raised inside this life, which does not create softness. But he is not what he appears. The coldness is a language he learned because he had no other one. He looked at her steadily. You are not afraid of him. No, she agreed. Good, he said. He needs someone who isn't. He's never had that. He adjusted his blanket with slow, careful hands. What do you want? For yourself. Not for the work. She was quiet for a moment. To build something that lasts, she said. Something real. He nodded slowly, like she had confirmed something. That is exactly what this empire needs, he said. And it is exactly what my son needs. He met her eyes. I hope you'll be patient with him. He doesn't know how to ask for things. He never learned. She walked out of that room with something sitting in her chest that she couldn't name and did not try to. The weeks that followed were their own particular kind of complicated. Nadia took the formal role, restructuring the Kang organization's digital infrastructure and transitioning the legitimate empire into something untouchable. She negotiated her terms across 4 hours in the legal office with 3 lawyers present, and when it was done, the lead attorney looked quietly traumatized. Joon-ho sat across from her throughout and did not interfere once. They worked together daily and argued about everything. He was demanding and exacting and moved through the world like someone who had never once in his life been told he needed to slow down, and she pushed back on every single thing that needed pushing back on, and he slowly, noticeably, in increments, she tracked the way she tracked everything, adjusted. He stopped dismissing her assessments without engaging them. He started asking her opinion on things outside the digital infrastructure. He started showing up at her office door late in the evenings under extremely thin pretexts. She did not point this out. She let it continue. She watched him work out how to be in proximity to a person he couldn't dismiss or intimidate or manage, and she found it, privately, in the part of herself she kept quiet, entirely fascinating. Min-seo announced one morning that she was taking over the digital security division's personnel decisions. When Nadia raised an eyebrow, Min-seo said, "You taught me how. Also, you're too busy. Also, I already did it," and walked out. Nadia stared at the door for a moment and then went back to work and felt something warm and domestic settle in her chest that she really needed to examine at some point. The moment that changed everything came on a rainy Wednesday. A man named Lee Sung-won appeared as the new liaison from the Kang organization's legal partner firm. He was good-looking and confident and assigned to work with Nadia on compliance, and he made his interest obvious in the way men do when they have always been told they are charming, the extra coffee, the unnecessary proximity. The questions he already knew the answers to. Nadia was not interested. She was professional and efficient and gave him nothing. Joon-ho noticed on the second day. She knew because the temperature dropped whenever he entered a room where Sung-won was present. She knew because he started materializing in her workspace during hours he was usually in strategy meetings. She knew because his responses to Sung-won's project updates became shorter and colder until they were essentially monosyllabic. She did not address it. The evening Sung-won appeared at her office door with takeout and a suggestion they go over the compliance timeline somewhere more comfortable. She was mid-migration and had neither the time nor the interest. And she was forming a professional decline when Joon-ho appeared at the end of the hallway. He did not rush. He walked at his normal pace. But the quality of his stillness as he reached them was extraordinary. "Compliance review is Monday," he said. "With the full team." His eyes moved to Sung-won and stayed there for 3 seconds with a specific quality that made the hallway feel considerably smaller. "Good evening." Sung-won processed this. Left in 11 seconds. Nadia turned to look at Joon-ho. He met her gaze with total composure. "That was unnecessary," she said. "I don't know what you mean." "Joon-ho. You've been here 14 hours, he said. "Go home." "You've been watching how long I've been here?" "I pay attention," he said, the same way he had said it the morning with the coffee, quiet and simple and with no apparent awareness of what it did to the air between them. She looked at him. He looked at her. The hallway was very quiet. "I'm not interested in him," she said. Something moved in his face. Quickly, like he was trying to contain it. "I didn't say anything about." "You didn't need to," she said. She closed her laptop and picked up her bag. "Good night, Joon-ho." She walked to the elevator. She heard him exhale behind her, one long, controlled breath, and she pressed the button and stared at the doors, and was very glad he could not see her face. The revelation came 3 weeks later, and it came from an unexpected direction. Kim Yong-soo was Chairman Kang's personal advisor. He had been at the family's table for 20 years. He was soft-spoken and formally dressed, and he had, Nadia discovered at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night, been running a ghost access point inside the Kang network since before she had arrived, a back door built into the system's original architecture, designed to survive exactly the kind of overhaul she had done, sitting dormant and invisible until the right moment. She found it because she never fully trusted a system she hadn't built from scratch. She traced it back in 2 hours. The access logs led to Kim Yong-soo's credentials. The documents he had passed to the Han organization, to a foreign investment group, to a government contact, were time-stamped across 18 months. He had been playing every side simultaneously with the patience of a man who had calculated he would never be caught. She called Joon-ho at 1 in the morning. He arrived in 7 minutes. He listened to everything she had found without sitting down, without interrupting, and she watched his face do something very controlled and very painful as the full architecture of Kim Yong-soo's betrayal became clear. "My father," he said, when she finished. "Trusted him completely," she said. "I know." He moved to the window. The rain was hitting the glass hard. The city below blurred and ran. "He was at my father's table when I was 6 years old," he said. Not to her specifically. Just to the air. He taught me how to read a balance sheet. She did not offer empty comfort. She let him stand in it. "Can you build a case?" he said finally. "Ironclad." "I already started," she said. 60 hours. Maybe less." He turned from the window. He crossed the office and stopped in front of her, the closest he had stood since the first night, and he looked at her with something so completely unguarded that it was almost difficult to hold. Every defense down. Every layer of the coldness and the control and the careful distance he maintained gone. Just him, raw and tired and real. "Nadia," he said. "Go see your father," she said, quietly. "I have this." "Go." He looked at her for one more moment. Then he raised his hand and touched her face, just briefly, just his fingers against her cheek, just a second, and walked out, and she stood in the empty office with her hand pressed against her own face and her composure doing something she very rarely let it do. She built the case in 58 hours. Min Seo was with her for most of it, and by the end Min Seo was running her own parallel documentation thread without being asked and catching secondary threads Nadia pointed her to. They worked in a focused, comfortable silence that felt like the kind of partnership you don't plan and can't manufacture, and when it was done, and the filing was submitted to 4 regulatory bodies simultaneously, Min Seo put her head down on the desk for 30 seconds, and then sat up and said, "I need you to know that you are my favorite person." "You're delirious," Nadia said. "Both things can be true," Min Seo said, and went to find coffee. Kim Yong-soo's exposure was quiet and final. Joon-ho sat across from him in a private room with Nadia's evidence and let him read it, and when the man looked up, Joon-ho told him to leave Korea that night before he does something to him. He apologized and left that night. Chairman Kang was told carefully, gently, by his son. Nadia was not in the room. But Joon-ho came to find her afterward, and he sat beside her on the office couch without speaking, and she did not make him speak. She simply sat with him in it, and after a while he said, very quietly, "Thank you for finding it before it got worse." "That's what I do," she said. "No," he said. "You do a lot more than that." She looked at him. He was looking at his hands. "Joon-ho." "I know," he said. "I know I don't say things well. I've been told." "I don't," he stopped. Breathed. "I noticed you the first night. Before I knew what you could do. I looked at you sitting in that room with 6 guns pointed at you and asking about the Wi-Fi, and I thought." He stopped again. "I don't have a word for what I thought." She was very still. "And then I was rude to you," he said. "Which was, I do that. When something unsettles me, I push it away. You unsettled me the first second I saw you, and I handled it badly, and I have been," he looked at her. Directly. "I have been trying to deserve a conversation like this one since the morning you made me apologize in that hallway." Nadia looked at him for a long moment. "You are still the most difficult man I have ever met," she said. "Yes. And you still don't know how to ask for things like a normal person." "That is accurate. And I have rebuilt your entire empire twice over and fielded your jealousy over a man I was never interested in and sat with your family's grief, and I'm still not sure if any of this is wise." He didn't look away. "Neither am I. I'm sure about you." "That's different." The office was very quiet. Outside, Seoul moved in its enormous, indifferent way. The rain had stopped. The city was wet and glittering and enormous. She reached over and took his hand. Not romantically. Just took it. Held it. The way you hold something you've decided is worth holding. He looked down at their hands. Then up at her. And something happened in his face, something that had been coiled and compressed and defended for 34 years, that simply, quietly let go. The months that followed were the best kind of complicated. They were not easy together. They had never been going to be easy. They argued constantly about timelines, priorities, the correct way to structure a governance policy, the way he spoke to people when he was under pressure, the way she disappeared into work when she was processing something emotional. He was possessive in ways she made him name and examine before she accepted them. She was independent in ways that required him to actively trust rather than control, and he worked at it with the same focused intensity he brought to everything, which was, she admitted privately, deeply attractive. He showed up. That was the thing that mattered beneath everything else. He showed up at 2 a.m. when her server migration failed and sat beside her without being asked. He showed up when her mother visited Seoul, and he cooked badly and earnestly and answered every pointed question with total honesty. He showed up when a former client tried to steal her work and dismantled the claims so thoroughly that the man's career did not recover. She showed up too. When the transition exhausted him and he went cold and silent, she sat across from him and did not let him disappear into it. When the Empire's first public launch hit a crisis 40 minutes before the event, she solved it from the back of the room and turned to find him watching her with an expression that made her want to look away and also stay exactly where she was forever. Min Seo ran the digital security division and thrived in it, fierce and precise and occasionally terrifying to her subordinates. She called Nadia Yoni and claimed it was for efficiency. Chairman Kang passed on a quiet Sunday with his family around him. Nadia sat outside the room and waited, and when Joon-ho came out he sat beside her in the hallway and said nothing at all, and she took his hand and held it, and he pressed his forehead to her shoulder like a man setting down something he had been carrying for a very long time. 6 months after the night she took his hand, on a Tuesday, because she had learned by now that Joon-ho did the most important things on ordinary days, she came to the office to find it empty except for him. No lawyers. No staff. Just Joon-ho, standing by the window in a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, with an expression she had learned to read, the one that meant he had been rehearsing something and had decided to throw out the rehearsal. Say it plainly, she said, because she knew him. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a ring. Simple, architectural, precisely the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. He held it out with completely steady hands and said, "I want to build this with you. All of it. The empire, the arguments, whatever comes after. I want you next to me for everything." He paused. "You are the only person who has ever made me feel like I needed to keep up. And I want to spend the rest of my life keeping up with you." He held her gaze. "Marry me, Nadia. Not because it's strategic. Because you are completely, irreversibly mine and I am completely, irreversibly yours, and I have been since the night you told me to close the door on my way out." Nadia looked at the ring. She turned it over in her fingers. "The certification documentation," she said. He blinked. "What?" "For the diamond. I need to verify this." She looked up. His expression was so catastrophically helpless that the laugh rose up from somewhere deep before she could stop it, warm and full and completely real. "It's perfect," she said. "The ring is perfect. Is that a yes?" She looked at him across the small space between them, this difficult, intense, irreversibly changed man who had called her disappointing and then spent 6 months proving himself wrong, and felt something settle in her chest with the particular piece of something finding its place. "Yes," she said. "That's a yes." He crossed the room, and she met him halfway, and when he held her face in both hands and kissed her, it was nothing like their first time on the rooftop. It was not tentative or questioning. It was the answer to everything that had been building since the night he looked at her across a room full of guns and felt something crack open that had never cracked before. The Kang Empire's legitimate inaugural gala was held on a Friday evening in December. Seoul's most powerful figures filled the venue. The Kang name, spoken here without lowered voices for the first time in 3 generations. The transition complete, clean, irrefutable, built on the most sophisticated compliance architecture any of their legal partners had seen. Nadia stood at the front of the room beside Joon-ho in a dress the color of midnight and felt, without surprise, that she belonged here. Not because the room had accepted her. Because she had built something in it that was worth belonging to. Min Seo materialized at her elbow. For people have asked me who designed the infrastructure framework. What did you tell them? I told them to email your office and wait like adults. A pause. Also, a government minister asked if you were available to consult for a national cybersecurity initiative. I'll look at the brief. I already had it sent to you. Min Seo straightened her dress. You're welcome, Yoni. She disappeared back into the room. Joon-ho found Nadia's hand under the table. He was mid-conversation with an international investment partner, his face composed and commanding, the face of a man built for rooms like this, and his thumb moved across her knuckles once, brief and deliberate. She pressed back. Their private language. The one they had built from 2 people who had not known how to be soft until they had taught each other. She looked out at the room, the empire rebuilt, restructured, legitimate and lasting, built on intelligence and stubbornness and the specific alchemy of 2 people who refused to manage each other, and felt the particular peace of someone who has stopped running and found that what they built in one place is more than enough. Joon-ho leaned close, just slightly, and said, "You're thinking loudly again." "I'm thinking I was right," she said. "About what?" She turned to look at him. He looked back, the same way he had looked at her on a rooftop in the rain, in the hallway of an airport, across a conference table full of people who did not understand what was happening between them. Like she was something he had been crossing a very long distance to find. "About staying," she said. He raised her hand from under the table and held it in plain view of the room. A declaration. The clearest one he knew how to make. She let him. And that, besties, is the story of the woman they called disappointing, the woman who rebuilt an empire, refused to be bought, and made the most powerful man in the room earn every single thing he got. Nadia didn't just shut down a toxic mafia boss. She made him better. And she did it on her own terms, in her own time, without bending once. If this story hit you in the chest the way it hit me writing it, share it right now with someone who needs a fierce female lead today. Hit that like button, drop a comment telling me your absolute favorite moment, and subscribe to Afrohan Tales, because we have more stories coming and you cannot afford to miss them. We will see you in the next one, besties. Blackheart.